Hello, I'm Jim Kern, Executive Director of the Vallejo Naval and Historical Museum, and welcome to the 17th Annual Vallejo Garden Tour. The Garden Tour is a big part of the museum's annual programming, most importantly as a fundraiser for the museum. The museum has been around for well over 40 years, collecting and sharing the history, art, and culture of our community. And the Garden Tour this year features 6 beautiful Vallejo gardens. Needless to say, we're going through some interesting times these days, so we've put together a virtual tour. We hope you enjoy what you see today. There's also some links to other gardening videos and garden-related information. We hope you click on those and get a little additional information as well. These days, gardening is more important than ever. People are working at home or sheltering at home, but people are also enjoying gardening by growing their own vegetables or just taking solace in nature and having an opportunity to reconnect with nature. So the garden tour helped bring us all together, even though for now we have to stay apart. Again, it's a fundraiser for the museum, so if you enjoy the garden tour today, visit our website at www.vallejomuseum.org and click on the donate button. We want the museum to continue to grow as well. Thank you and enjoy the tour.
Welcome to the 17th Annual Vallejo Garden Tour, presented by the Vallejo Naval and Historical Museum. This year's tour features 6 beautiful Vallejo gardens. The Craig Yard. Jana and Emma Craig's garden is located off Wilson Avenue, close to the Napa River and in the shadow of the Highway 37 bridge. Years of drought in California were the impetus for planting the garden that they have today. They previously had a traditional lawn in front with a towering liquid amber tree whose roots were becoming a nuisance. 3 years ago, they tore up both the tree and the lawn and planned a low-water landscape to fill the void left by those beloved fixtures in the yard. The newly bare yard was punctuated by plants as they found them: English lavender, dwarf euphorbia, verbena delamina, and others. In a year's time, the low-water landscape was thriving, and they were delighted to find the life it brought to their yard compared with the previous simple lawn. They loved the diverse textures, plants of varying heights and habits, and lots of honeybees and butterflies enjoying the new offerings. There is incredible potential with cut flowers when the spring yields blooms like anemone and freesias, and the summer provides yarrow and Russian sage that make for lovely weekly bouquets. The front yard leads directly into the backyard since they tore down the fence dividing the spaces, preferring the aesthetics of an open area. An apple and fruit cocktail tree flank the path leading to a clearing covered in decomposed granite. The Gaea Yard. Barbara Gaea's yard is located on a quiet street in central Vallejo. She participated in a water conservation program through which she received money for replacing her water-hungry lawn with an approved alternative. The stones that replaced her old lawn are intended to suggest highways, planets, and constellations. They give no hint about the yard behind the house. Upon rounding the house, you enter a lush, green wonderland. The large yard includes a vegetable garden, statues, small plants, medium shrubs, trees, and vines. The area is shady, an aspect that allows for minimized water consumption. Barbara calls it dry shade gardening. The scope and variety of vegetation in her garden is remarkable.
Barriers. I've had a nightmare with this garden for many years. If you look at the bottom of that bed, you'll see a 2x6 board. If you look up there, there's about 15 to 20 foot high oleanders and one of the biggest Canary Island date palms in town, which is they have evolved to send roots out for hurricanes growing in sand. So that palm and the oleanders, roots will take up the whole garden. So every year I would stand on a fork, rock it back and forth, front and back, and have to get on my hands and knees with my bare hands and pull out masses of roots like spaghetti. I asked every master gardener, including all my gurus at Mid-City. No one knew what to do until Velma at Lowe's said, an air is the only thing that will stop roots. So I had to pull out the whole drip system, flatten it, put black plastic, put these 2x4s across, and then build boxes. It wasn't that hard. Just build a box out there in the other part of the yard. Put a plywood, pressure-treated plywood on the bottom as a floor. Drill a bunch of holes for the water to come through. Turn it up, and then you can get window screen by the foot so that the soil doesn't come through the holes. And then place them on these boards. And now I love to say I do geriatric gardening. 4 fingers. Just take 2 fingers and like move the plants, move around on a little stool, one of those tool stools. You can move around. When I'm 100 years old, I can just garden with fingers. You put bulk from the place next to Mid-City, soil in here. And from then on, you don't have to ever turn it again. You just modify it. It's come apart a little bit, but there's about 6 inches of air under there. That's why I don't want to water too much, because they can support mice sometimes, but if you have a cat in the neighborhood. But it makes it really easy to garden. That's a big fan of these raised beds, because they're very good for seniors. You don't have to bend over so far. So it's kind of fun. Black beauty tomatoes look very striking. The flavor isn't as good as the brandywines, but normally they grow up to the top of these poles reaching for the sun. But this year is not a good year for them. But it's nice to have the eggplants. And one of my favorite ideas is to plant the Royal Burgundy dark purple bush beans all around the edge because they just spill over and they give and give and give and don't take any room. Oh, cocoa shells. This is good. It's fabulous. I'm telling everybody who will listen, it's lightweight, it's cheap, it goes on so easy, it stays beautiful, and the cats don't like to walk in it, so they don't use your garden as a litter box. But my favorite thing, I'm almost nose blind, I don't smell well, and I'll walk by here and it smells like the blue can in the middle of all the beds, and I'm going to put more in someday, are what I call my bait cage vermiculture. I used to have a big bin on the back patio trying to do the whole worm farming thing, and it was, you know, every week, all year long, you have to go out and take care of it, and it was just too much work for too little payback. And some brilliant person with sustainable Solano said you can get there are canister, it's about 8 inches long with holes all around it. They're called bait cages at the sporting goods stores. You just put it in there, the lid screws off, put all your food scraps in there, put it on. About a month, 2 months later, come back and there's compost in these little cans. So no turning and feeding. It just is the easiest and I think the most effective way because the worms crawl into this holes, eat whatever they want to eat, and then crawl back out and feed the soils. I see everywhere, like the watering trough over there. I had a hole, so I went and got a watering trough. He painted it brown. Is that there? Okay, when I moved in here, I had even more trees. It was literally a forest, and I would go to the Waterwise workshops, and all the plants they would bring would be sun lovers, because most of the drought-tolerant plants, and I'm really big in taking care of the drought, wouldn't work for me. And I would look up in my big Western garden book, and most of the shade-tolerant plants were water guzzlers. There's very little overlap. So that has become my specialty. My absolute favorite, the left, is the big white euonymus. I have them dotted here and there all over because they take no water, and at the books, some of these things, the book says they need sun, well, they do just fine in deep shade. My other favorite at the far back, there's a shorter one with red tinges, is Nandina, or heavenly bamboo. Never water it. Like this giant gold euonymus. I never water it because I don't want it to get any bigger. So I like stuff like that. You stick it in, get it established, and forget about it. These Boston ferns are pretty drought tolerant. I call them grass ferns because they spread like grass. And when you reach down, the whole entire root system that's like an inch below the dirt comes right up, and you can hand it to people. They stick it in the pot and it becomes a huge, gorgeous fern plant. A lot of people like the asparagus fern, the foxtail type. Someone in town who's with the Senior Center Garden Club gives people little sprigs of this bloodleaf plant, and that's the only thing that really needs regular water, but it's the arbiter, it's the canary in the mine that says, yoo-hoo, it's time to water everybody, because they're pooping out, but then they spring right back. And if you look deep, you might need a close-up, but one of my favorite garden ideas is to have a bunch of big black pots with cast iron plants, because I don't want to see the fence. So they fill in the holes in the background. So if you really look, you can see a bunch of tall, dark green leaves. That's cast iron plant, and they're a brilliant idea for filling holes. And they get moved around a lot as the garden kind of morphs and changes. You always stick succulents here and there where you have a hole because they'll grow in deep shade. Virginia is one of my favorite front because it blooms in the winter. That and golden daisy, it's in the middle by the red bath. I like things that bloom in winter. Because I grew regular spinach once, never again. All you get is it's like broccoli. One good serving and then it gets all spindly and someone gave me this little piece of New Zealand spinach. It grows like crazy, like a ground cover all over the place. Hard frost and major heat wave. It'll die back a little bit in a major heat wave, but it doesn't die.
The Guidry Yard. Upon arriving at the home of Michael Guidry, you're impressed by all the plants growing in terracotta pots. There is a great variety of vegetation in these pots that are presented at various heights. Michael is a serious gardener who has purchased nearly 1,500 pots while developing his stunning yard over the past 6 years. As you walk toward the backyard, red hearts and decorative red bottles hang everywhere. In fact, there is a sea of red, and it seems like every day is Valentine's Day in this backyard. On the walls are arrays of ceramic masks of people representing all the major ethnic groups in the world. Michael created the masks himself as he completed a ceramics course at Solano Community College.
And if you notice, a lot of them have their mouths open because they're singing over my garden. And it's just to make it a peaceful, happy place.
Narrow paths allow visitors to take different routes through the beautiful surroundings that include succulents, ferns, and other flowering plants as they head toward a private sitting area. Above are the branches of a large pine tree, festooned with pots, hearts, and masks. This yard is a magical oasis tucked into a neighborhood of South Vallejo. The Horst Yard. The John and Kathy Horst Garden is located in the heart of Bayview Terrace. This beautiful yard contains a marvelous palette of style and color. The first thing you notice is the perfectly neat front yard with a manicured lawn and whimsical giant frog on the front wall. Going into the backyard, you enter a shade garden with a very comfortable sitting area surrounded by plants of all shapes and colors. A lovely waterfall lends to the serenity and peacefulness you feel when you look around. There is also a well-constructed utility area with raised beds, potting bench, and grilling area. Truly a gem to behold and enjoy. the Vallejo People's Garden. In 2009, Vallejo resident Vilma Aquino set out to develop a community garden after seeing a barren lot in her neighborhood on Mare Island. Partnering with Elvie De Leon of the Global Center for Success and Amanda Cundiff of the U.S. Forest Service, the three lobbied to gain community support in an effort to obtain a grant from Nature's Path Organics. The Vallejo People's Garden was one of 3 gardens nationwide that won a grant to develop a community garden. In recognition of winning the grant, the Vallejo People's Garden was featured in Organic Gardening magazine. It has also been featured in Edible East Bay, a local magazine celebrating the food culture of the Bay Area. Since 2010, the Vallejo People's Garden has developed several partnerships and worked with many volunteers, students from Toro University and the California Maritime Academy, the California Conservation Corps, Kaiser Permanente, Mare Island Health and Fitness, Lowe's, the Food Empowerment Project, Farm Fresh, and many more. The garden has hosted classes to educate the community about gardening, including soil education, water conservation, how to make soap, how to prune fruit trees, and how to start a worm bin, to name just a few. The garden does not use any pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, or synthetic fertilizers.
This is our aquaponic system, and we brought it here so that we can show people that no matter how small or big your yard is, you can still include one of these, grow fish and food in a small space at the same time. Let me show you how it works. Fish is down here, and as the fish poop, it gets pumped up via a pump up here where the nitrates get broken down by bacteria that the plants can use as fertilizer. The plants clean the water, goes back down as clean water to the fish. So right now we have goldfish in here, but in the right climate you can grow tilapia and other fish that grows in your area, grows well in your area. Planted here are herbs. You can grow things like lettuce, basil, parsley. We have here thyme, oregano. You can pretty much grow anything, spinach. I grew a carrot in one of these before, and when I pulled the carrot out and compared it to the soil-grown carrot, the roots of the carrot were robust. It was very strong.
Features of the garden include a worm bin, aquaponics system, greenhouse, compost bin, compost tea brewer, outdoor classroom, bat and bird houses, water conservation areas, insect houses, espalier, meditation garden, and the garden mobile. The most current project is the yoga tai chi deck at the meditation garden that is still in progress.
We have 20 raised beds here at the Vallejo People's Garden. One is much taller, and that's for folks who really aren't able to bend over. And in that bed, we probably have growing kale, a bunch of tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes. And as you can see over here is Elvie and Spring, 2 master gardeners who are adding compost to the asparagus bed, which is a good time to do right now in the summertime, to add compost to your asparagus bed. Behind Spring, with a turquoise sweater, is more heirloom tomatoes. We were donated a bunch of tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes, so that's why we have a lot of heirloom tomatoes in the garden. It's hard to show you behind all the sunflowers, but we do have Jerusalem artichokes, yacon, and other vegetables. It's hard to see. New Zealand spinach, yellow squash, potatoes.
How about your greenhouse?
Greenhouse. We got to start our seeds now, but we need volunteers. Since the pandemic, we haven't had many volunteers, and because of that, this garden was infested with aphids. Every bed was infested with aphids, and I've tried making my own concoction. I brought in ladybugs. That helped a little, but what really worked was when we smoked them out. We created little fire beds in some of these beds, and we directed the smoke kind of all over the garden. and now we don't see any aphids to be seen. So what we have around the garden are these bug houses, and it's just made out of, I put in here a lot of twigs to attract like wasps or bees to nest in, because we could all use more pollinators in the garden.
Now more than ever is the time to grow your own food. Since 2010, volunteers at the Vallejo People's Garden have grown approximately 2,000 pounds of produce each year that has gone to help seniors, food banks, homeless shelters, and those most in need. Let's grow together to make our community a healthier one. The McCoy Yard. When Kit McCoy bought her home on D Street, the backyard was filled with weeds, blackberries, and ivy. There were no trees to give relief from the west-facing exposure in the summer, and it was blisteringly hot. It was a prickly and unwelcome space. Kit has always loved the serenity and simplicity of Japanese gardens. She used to imagine a waterfall cascading down the terraced hill in a serene and beautiful Japanese landscape. The garden has evolved into that dream, and she now has her own Zen sanctuary. She is always at peace when she's in the garden. The garden also has many visitors, like raccoons, possums, skunks, squirrels, neighborhood cats, and a variety of birds. During the migration in the spring, many birds stop off for a bath and a drink in the waterfall. Kit hopes that as you visit her garden, you will enjoy that same feeling of peace. We hope you've enjoyed this year's garden tour. Please keep in mind that the tour is an important fundraiser for the Vallejo Naval and Historical Museum. Visit www.vallejomuseum.org and donate if you can.